for many, many years and has authored many books on the subject of UFOs, and has gotten into various degrees of trouble over this subject. But he has one of the largest collection of photos in the world. And of course, he used to be in photo recon when he was in the Air Force. And you're going to see some new ones here, some amazing ones, some things that we started
Thank you, Bill. Oh, that's a video? Does that change the slides?
No, it should be. That's okay, we'll deal with it later.
Oh, okay, you got somebody to change the slides in?
You.
Oh, okay. All right.
It shows up there.
Oh, all right. Okay, I'm glad to be here. If, you know, there's a saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, if that's the case, then there's a lot of evidence you're going to see today here, because there's going to be over 100 pictures, new pictures of UFOs that have not been shown anywhere before. I'm going to show you probably the best 100 slides of the 1990s. This is not all of the UFO pictures taken in the 1990s. This is a skimming of several hundred that have been taken, and I picked them out for variety more than anything else. UFOs are reported in a lot of different shapes. They were reported as discs with domes or cupolas on top, another bulge on the bottom. They've been reported as spheres, as oblate spheroids, which is a squashed down sphere a little bit. They look like an oval from the side. We have cubes, rectangles, triangles, all kinds, cylinders, flying cylinders, all kinds. I don't have all of those represented here because there's not that many of some classifications. But we're going to look at a number of different shapes and styles here today. There's a, is that too much light on that? Can you read it? Can't read it. Well, okay. They're seen in all parts of the world by all people. Believers will be thrilled and convinced. Skeptics will find their positions shaken. There we go. There's 140 slides in this group here of high credibility, selected from over 2,000. Hoaxes, if there's any reason that I suspect a photograph is a hoax, I throw it out. I don't necessarily buy everybody else's interpretations of what's a hoax and what isn't, because many that have been declared hoaxes by others I find to be intrinsically real. They're mostly dense physical objects. I usually rank them in an order of high domes, no domes, high domes, low domes, no domes, and double domes, but in this case the selection is random of the best ones that we have. They're called different names in different countries. In Spanish they call them discos volantes. in French is Sokupis volantes, Fliegende Untertassen in German, Fliegende Schotel in Swedish, Dischi volantes in Italian, and in Chinese they're Lai Lai Puming Fu Huing What. And their short version is flying pans. It translates as flying pans because they're shaped something like a wok. The probability is quite remarkable. There's 50 billion suns in our own average galaxy, 10 planets orbiting our sun, including the one that was destroyed, making up the asteroid belt today, would give us 500 billion potential planets in our galaxy, or similar, if all are small like ours. Ours is a small galaxy. If 1 in 10 planets is life-bearing, there will be 50 billion potential planets like ours with life. If only 1 in 1,000 life-bearing planets has life anything like ours, there could be 50 million planets with life like ours. If 1/2 of these planets were more advanced than us and 1/2 less, assuming that ours is a median evolution, then there would be 25 million life-bearing planets more advanced than us and possibly traveling in space and time. If one our size, a planet our size, as advanced as us, could build 10,000 aircraft in 1 year as we did in World War II, there could be 250 billion spaceships in our galaxy alone. So that leaves a lot of room for potential visitation from other people. Now, with all of these statistics available to us, the Tucson Daily Star for 2 April 1947, this year, published this report: UFOs not a concern to the Pentagon. Washington, convinced that there is no extraterrestrial threat, the U.S. military long ago stopped keeping track of UFOs, Pentagon spokesman Kenneth Bacon said yesterday. The suicide last week of 39 members of Heaven's Gate, a high-tech UFO cult, prompted a question at yesterday's Pentagon briefing on whether the military follows the UFO situation. Bacon said that the Air Force investigated UFO reports from 1947 to 1969, but out of 12,618 reported sightings, they found no evidence of extraterrestrials or even any aircraft representing exotic technology or a threat to the United States. This is an official United States Air Force statement published in all the newspapers in the country. The Air Force stopped the practice because virtually all the UFOs it investigated were explainable as aircraft or weather phenomena and posed no threat. Asked about the possible existence of UFOs, Bacon said the U.S. government cannot substantiate that they exist at all. Now, that's our United States government position today on UFOs. This slide is a picture that I took. Wow. This slide is a picture that I took at the sand dunes over in Yuma, Arizona. And I did this to show the apparent size of the moon in a 35 millimeter slide photograph with an ordinary handheld 35 millimeter camera. I must be getting feedback. Can you hear me now if I step over here? Okay. So anything that you see on the screen here that I present after this that appears to be bigger than that would have appeared to the photographer to have been bigger than the rising moon. And I don't think you'll see very many that are smaller than this. So all of these represent a fairly large and explicit observation by the photographer. There's going to be some question about multiple witnesses or multiple photo events by one witness. This picture, for instance, was taken by Joe Clower out in Los Angeles, California. And as we go through this, you're going to see probably a dozen or more photographs made by Joe Clower. But remember that, and a thing that we've noticed in collecting the photographs is that after a person has taken the first photograph, he is more likely to get more photographs than somebody who has never taken one. We have Ed Walters, who has taken photographs more than 8 times. Now he's over a dozen times that he's taken pictures. We had Paul Villa that took pictures 7 times. Carlos Diaz in Mexico 4 times. Arthur Romero Garcia in Mexico more than 4 times. Harold Trudell 5 times. Billy Herman 4 times. Vancouver Teens 6 times. Billy Meyer 10 times. George Adamski 5. Joe Clower 10 times. And he has friends that have taken pictures also more than once. So this one was taken by Joe Clower as he was walking to his car in a suburban street in downtown Los Angeles in the autumn of 1988. What I'm doing is showing the last of the last decade as a kind of a preface going into the decade of the 90s, because there were some remarkable pictures that never got published anywhere, and this is one of them. This was taken in the late afternoon as he was walking to his car. This picture was taken over Santa Monica by the same man. We've lost the UFO almost on the top there. He came out of a store across the street and looked, and as he stepped out into the street, he saw some people looking up, saw this, went to his car right there and parked in front, got his little Polaroid one-step camera out, and snapped this one picture before it flew away. Santa Monica, California, February 1989. Here's another one taken by Joe Clower up at Federal Heights, Colorado. Now, this is a very unusual type. It's the only photograph we have of a rectangular flying object, which he observed and stopped his car, got out with his little Polaroid one-step camera, snapped the one picture, and it flew away, and he drove on. This next picture is one of a series taken in Nashville, Tennessee on 27 September 1989 in the evening by, I can probably see okay from here. This was taken by a wheelchair-bound man who had been working for retired Commander Graham Bethune, who, after he left the Navy, established an optics business and was building special lenses for Navy requirements. The man, the former employee, maintained contact with his ex-boss, Commander Graham, and he began telling him about seeing a strange pinkish-orange light in the sky, and he was going to try to get a camera and get some pictures of it, and he asked Bethune to recommend a camera. Bethune says, just get an ordinary 35 millimeter camera and let me make you a special lens for it, which Graham immediately began doing. He built him a 2,000 millimeter telephoto lens. You know, the commercial ones, the biggest zoom you can buy is 75 to 200 millimeter. This was a 2,000 millimeter telephoto lens, 10 times as big as the ordinary off-the-shelf lenses. Does that flare out the screen? So after the man was given the camera and the lens, they also built some special filters for it. And he has them in the trunk of his car, and he and his wife were driving north out of Nashville when they saw the pinkish-orange light in the sky. He stopped his car, got out, got the camera out, got out a heavy tripod provided by Commander Bethune, mounted the camera with the 2,000 millimeter lens on it. It had some special filters on the front of the lens, and focused it in or sighted it in on the pinkish orange light in the sky. With the naked eye, it only looked like a small blinking light. Through the 2,000 millimeter lens, this is what the witness was seeing, and he started snapping the pictures. That light is what they call truncated light. Those beams of light are chopped off, and they were being extended and retracted like rods of glass. The lights around the rim continually changed in color and changed in sequence, and sometimes they looked like running lights. There were lights around the cupola on the bottom, and that what looks like a ball in the middle of this was being extended and retracted. At the same time, the lights were being extended and retracted, and the vapor was flowing around the whole thing. Here's another picture of it. You have only the red lights visible around the rim. This object has been copied in a 10-foot diameter model mounted on the top of the Roy Acuff Theater in Nashville, Tennessee today. Most people that go by there see that the model on the theater say, oh boy, there's where that guy took those pictures. But the pictures were taken in 1978, and the model hasn't been there but 3 or 4 years. And also you can see that the model is made of sheet aluminum riveted together, whereas the original photograph didn't have any mating lines at all for the metal. This picture was taken, it's one of a series, taken over Los Angeles, California in the autumn of 1989 at sundown by Mr. Joe Clower, who looked out the window of an office building he was in, ran down to his car, got his camera, and started snapping pictures. Here it's a little bit fuzzed out because it's approaching the camera so fast that it's growing in size as the shutter is open, and fuzzed it out. But he He watched, continued to take pictures. It moved around to his left and began to descend over along the side of a tall building and over a lower building here, and came down, was moving back and forth in a slow zigzag pattern down over this building like this. He snapped that picture, and then it slowly moved around to the right again, back to the right, the direction it came from, and back into the shadow from the setting sun. And here's the final picture. Well, I beg your pardon. That's next to the last picture. It's moving back now, and here we have the last picture taken where it's now in shadow again, and we can see the shape, the profile, and the outline a little bit better. This next picture was taken over Death Valley, California, by Michael Davey, a friend of Joe Clower's. The three men, Joe Clower, Michael Davey, and Steve Thompson, were together in the desert looking for fluorescent rocks when they had their first experience with a UFO. They all three saw it. Nobody got pictures of it. It flew on. But sometime after that, Joe Clower managed to get a picture. He bought a Polaroid camera and he got one picture. Had copies made and sent it around to Mike Davey and Steve Thompson. Then later, Mike Davey got this picture in Death Valley. And after that, Steve Thompson even got a picture also. And they kept sending them around to each other. Here's another one made by Mike Davey there in Death Valley. And here's one made at Titus Canyon, which runs into Death Valley. This was a little later in the same day, and Mike Davey is moving out of the Death Valley area when he saw it again and took this picture. Here's a picture taken over a place in California. This is also Titus Canyon. It's a different craft. It was still later in the day, and Mike Davey has moved on up the road and up the canyon some distance where he got this picture. Then Joe Clower's friend Steve Thompson sent him this UFO that he had taken out in California near Antelope Canyon. Sent him this picture and told him a little bit about the story. This next picture was taken by Steve Thompson again, and he didn't furnish. He sent this along with the one just before this to Joe Clower, showing that he had taken two pictures himself now, and he's using a little plastic, 35 millimeter plastic hand camera that was a small one with a single shutter speed, 1/35 of a second, no focus adjustment or anything like that. It's the common disposable kind of camera. This next picture was taken over Canaima, Venezuela, in January of 1990. Now we're beginning the decade of the 90s, and this is the first one. Taken by Mr. Ray Harcourt, a retired Coast Guard officer from Long Island, New York, who was vacationing near Angel Falls in Venezuela and was camped out at Hacha Falls. It's a little sub-falls there, a 2-hour hike from Canaima. Early the next morning, he saw what he thought was a water tower above the low hanging mist, a low fog that the sky was blue above it. And he went for a camera. By the time he got the camera out and got it ready, the mist had risen a little bit in the rising sun, and the object is just in the lower levels of the mist. It was projecting this red beam to the ground. He managed to get this one picture, and then it rose and disappeared in the mist. He couldn't get a second one. This picture was made over Palominos Island in Puerto Rico on the 6th of July 1990 at 5:30 in the morning by Mr. Guillermo Corday, standing on the deck of his own yacht, moored in the harbor there, in the anchorage there, and looking out across the water at the early morning sun. He saw the water begin to move in a circle, to rotate like a whirlpool in the water. Then it began to get a bulge in the middle of the whirlpool, and the top of this object, metallic object, emerged, rose out of the water, began ascending into the air. Here you can still see the water running off the flanges of the craft as it ascended. It flew into the clouds and disappeared. This next one is a series of pictures taken at Tver, Russia. It's a small suburban area north of Moscow, on 3 March 1991 by Alexander Pavlov and Alexei Vasilov from a local television station. This is from a television film clip. They were out here in the middle of a morning, a kind of a misty, foggy morning, when they saw the object on the other side of the river. And here is Alexei Vasilev's shoulders on the right-hand side here. His friend is standing a little bit behind him and shooting the images here. And there it moves across. Now Alexei is pointing at it. Here's it's moved on past Alexei now. He's on the left-hand side. The object moved back and forth over the area across the river. This picture now was taken over Pacific Palisades, California in the spring of 1991 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, again by Mr. Joe Clower. He's coming from lunch at a little sidewalk restaurant there and walking to his car when he saw this flying object above the street. When he got to his car, he grabbed his little Polaroid one-step camera, snapped this photo, and then got into his car because it's flying away down the street and began to follow it. He's following it down the street now and shoots this picture through the windshield as he's starting to catch up to it. And then it's speeded up, and he's still following it down the road until he comes to a break in the vegetation on the left-hand side, stopped his car, jumped out with the Polaroid, and snapped this picture. He pulled that film out and watched it as it made a turn at that point and began going back up the beach in the direction that it came from, where he got this last and final picture on the Polaroid film. This picture was taken over Puebla City in Puebla State of Mexico by a young man, Mexican man, Luis N., a young adult, and I think he's 20 or 21 years old, of the city of Puebla, who began hearing voices in a state between sleep and waking in the morning, and in a reverie state, and the voices were giving him places that he didn't know what they meant at first. Then he suspected they may be giving him rendezvous points, and after several of these, well, he didn't try to do anything. He decided to go to the location that was mentioned that morning, and he took his cousin with him in his car, drove to the spot, and the object appeared immediately. He got a picture of that. Then they started driving from there towards the airport. It passed the car on the right-hand side. He got a picture through the windshield, which I don't have here. And when they got to the airport, they found it hovering over the communications tower at the airport, and he took this picture, took another one here. It's out the scene at the top there. Well, not too important. We'll go on. Here he handed the camera to his cousin and said, "Take a picture of me." And he's sitting on a little cement stub wall here, looking at the object while his cousin snaps a picture of his head in the picture with the object. This is a blow-up of the same object there. You can see that it has very symmetrical structure and form. It's not a cloud perception. It's not a smoke mass. It's nothing like that. Here's a picture taken over Denver, Colorado in May of 1991 by Joe Clower again, who looked out the upstairs window of his house and saw this beautiful domed craft hovering over his backyard. He went for his Polaroid camera and shot this picture through the thermopane glass of the upstairs bedroom window of the object over the yard. Then a few days later, he's downstairs in the kitchen, and he on impulse went and looked out the kitchen window and saw this object over the backyard. And he went for the Polaroid, and he stepped out the back door and snapped this one picture of it here, watched it for a few moments, and began to circle back and move over his house. He snapped a second picture here, both Polaroids, and had them in the camera. This picture was taken over Stonehenge, England, in the summer of 1991. Jeff Woods of Bristol was visiting the Stonehenge ruins when he snapped a picture of the ruins just for a record that he'd been there and of the ruins. He did not see the object in the picture there, but when the developed print came back, it clearly shows a structured object. It's clearly registered in all layers of the emulsion of the film. It has color. It's reflecting the rays of the sun, and he's got the big rocks there. The whole picture shows a lot more of the rocks, but the object is too small to really make out any detail if I had the whole picture in here. This next one was taken over Easter Island. People wonder if the UFOs watch ancient civilizations. This seems to be some kind of evidence that they may be. Oh boy, this is out the top. Here's a picture of a man is taking a picture of his wife standing by one of the big heads. And up here in the upper left-hand corner, if you can see it, is a disc-shaped object hovering in the sky. He did not see it at the time that he took the picture, but it's very interesting that it's there. This next one was taken over at Leaksco town in Puebla State of Mexico on 7 July 1991 at 8 o'clock in the evening. 4 judicial police officers riding in 2 police cars were returning to the city of Atlixco when they saw a brilliant light approaching at low level down the highway. They thought it looked like an airplane with its landing light on, going to land on the highway, and they pulled far off to the road to the right to give it room to go by. Didn't land, but it came by at very low level, just 100 feet or so above the ground. The police captain in charge ordered the police photographer in the second van to get a picture of it so they could try to identify the license numbers by special development and find out who the crazy guy was that was flying so low down the road at night. When they developed the pictures, this is what they got. When they showed it to the police chief, he says, "What's this?" The photographer says, "We don't know. What do you think it is?" It's the picture of the airplane that we snapped last night. This was shown to the mayor. This was also shown to a Japanese media team visiting there at the time. They interviewed the mayor and the police chief and picked up copies of the picture and published it in Japan. This next one was taken on 11 July. Now remember, the one I just showed you was taken on 7 July. That's 4 days before the beginning of the total eclipse in Mexico City. On 11 July, the total eclipse is moving across Mexico, starting with Ciudad Obregón on the west coast and moving slowly across even over Mexico City. On that 11 July at 1:20 after lunch, that's the total eclipse is always occur just about noon. Mr. Pablo Hernandez Trevino was standing outside with his camera on a tripod talking to a friend and snapping pictures of the sun going into eclipse. He snapped 3 pictures, and this bluish disc-shaped object appeared in all 3 pictures, but in slightly different positions. I only put the one in here. Now, in Mexico City, not far from here, and about 10 minutes or so of shadow time from this total eclipse, a resident of Mexico City was doing the same thing, snapping pictures of the eclipsing sun and talking to a friend, and this luminous object was in the sky, clearly visible to everybody. He snapped a picture of it there. They waited a few seconds for the sun to go further into eclipse. He snapped another picture of it there. You can see that it's moved. And he waited a few seconds more, and snapped another picture with a near total eclipse. And here you see it on this side of the sun, eclipsing the sun. Now, a well-known UFO researcher published a report in Fate magazine, an article alleging that the photographs made in Mexico at the time of the eclipse were all Venus, seen with the sun dark and seen in the sky. Well, we got a lot of pictures of the eclipse with Venus in the picture. Venus is quite a ways out to the right, it would be in this picture here. So this certainly is not Venus, because we see it between us and the sun crossing it, and it did that just a few seconds from a perimeter view. This next one was photographed over Lublin, Poland. We don't get many good pictures from East Bloc countries, and this was taken on 31 May 1991 at 7:50 in the morning by Mr. Robert Janik, a young resident of Lublin, who looked out his apartment window and saw this over the town, and he went for a small handheld plastic camera, Instamatic 135 camera, stepped out on the porch and snapped this one picture of that object in the sky. The object was moving. When he snapped the camera, he moved the camera. There are those light cameras. You push the button, you also push the camera a little bit. So it doesn't have the best resolution in the world, but it is a picture from Poland. This next picture was snapped over Campo Grande, Brazil, in December of 1991 by Carlos Medeso from Campo Grande, who was working with 3 men near Punta Pora on the Paraguayan border when they saw this strange flying object over a hill some 2 kilometers away. The top of the hill was this side of that. A little orange light came out of the bottom of the object, grew big on the tops of the trees below, and then dissolved into a small point and went back aboard the craft again, the disc again. And Carlos snapped one photo of it while it was in its largest stage. After it flew away, they walked to that area to take a look, and they found that the leaves on the trees in the area of the yellow glow there were beginning to wilt from radiation, heat, or something. This next picture was snapped over Denver, Colorado by a neighbor of Joe Clower that knew that Joe Clower was taking pictures of UFOs, the neighbor saw this over a building site near his home, snapped a picture and gave it to Joe the next time he saw him, saying, they're out here, I got one too. Here's another picture taken over Mexico at Iguala Guerrero in 1991 by a reader of the Mexican UFO magazine Revista OVNI, published in Mexico City. The reader sent the picture to the magazine and asked them if they could explain what it was. He didn't give a name or a return address, so he said he didn't want any attention, didn't want anybody coming to him. They could have the picture. This next picture was snapped at the Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado in January of 1992. Mr. Joe Clower again, coming out of the tunnel in his car, saw this object in the sky. He pulled his car off to the right and snapped this first picture through the windshield, and there you can see the rear view mirror in the upper right-hand corner. And the object that was slowly moving away, he stepped out of the car and snapped the second picture of it. This is a picture of the same object withdrawing from the scene. This next picture was taken over the Fiji Islands in the Pacific, and notice that there's 6 orange lights in a circle in the sky and an object below here. James Parker Jr. of San Francisco, on vacation in the Fiji Islands for some deep sea fishing, upon returning to port late in the day, watched 6 orange lights rotating in a circle in the sky above him. He had been watching these for about 15 minutes. And then a dark flying object came in from the right, darted in from the west, and hung there in the sky for a moment, during which he snapped the photograph, and then it ascended into the sky, joined the 6 circles moving rotating in a circular fashion, joined them, and the whole thing ascended into the clouds and disappeared from sight. This next picture was taken, one of a series, taken at Tulancingo in Hidalgo province of Mexico by Mr. Hector Carranza Garcia and his friend Rolando Briseño, who were walking between 2 small towns on a dirt road. They were carrying an Instamatic 110 camera, Hector was, 110 camera, and they looking for opportunity shots to get some pictures. Looking up, they saw this shaped object in the sky, which they immediately proceeded to take pictures of, and they snapped the last 4 frames of film in the camera of the object as it moved about. Now notice that this is circular in shape, has 3 hemispheres on the bottom. It looks very much like one of the remote control vehicles used by the Palladians in Switzerland in the investigation we carried out there. Here's another picture from that series at Tulancingo. Here's another. You can see it at edge profile again. And another as it's starting to leave the scene. And that's the last one. It's now moving off in the distance. This picture was taken over Canyon City, Colorado in September 1992 by Mr. Joe Clower, who was looking for rocks. He had his dog with him. The dog was running around. Clower looked up and saw this object, went to his car, got the Polaroid, was taking a picture of the object. When the dog ran into the scene, he whistled or said something to the dog to get him out of the scene. The dog just stopped and looked, so he snapped the picture anyway. Next, here is Vancouver, taken over Vancouver, British Columbia, on the 17th of October 1992. A group of young teenager, high school students, began seeing this strange object flying over their local neighborhood, and they'd seen it a number of times, by which time they decided to obtain a camera with some film and try to get some pictures of it. They had another opportunity. They saw it when they're together, sent one of the children to the home that had the camera. He came back in time to start snapping pictures. They snapped over half the roll of pictures at that time. Here's one of them. Here's another picture of it at the same time. Here's another picture. There's a date down there in the corner, 17 October 1992. The building you see here with the oval windows is a hospital building in Vancouver. Here you can see that it is a double-flanged object, has a high dome and 2 flanges, one above the other. Now, here is, they had a second opportunity. They snapped those pictures, had them developed out. The children saw it again, sent one of them member for the camera, snapped the second series of pictures. This is one of those. There were several in the second series. I got a third and a fourth series, but it would have taken up too much time to put them all in here. This is the only picture ever taken on panoramic film or a panoramic shot of a UFO. This was taken near Braunschweig, Germany on 8 March 1993, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Just after lunch, Mr. Karsten Brettschneider was walking in a wooded area there. He was a bird watcher. He was going to take pictures of birds when he came upon this shiny dome disc that was hovering low over the scrub in the area, and it began to ascend as soon as he stepped into the clearing. He readied his camera and got this one picture before it got too high. He changed the film and got a second picture, which I don't have in there, and then the object was too far away for a third picture. This picture was taken on the 10th of March of 1993 at Ochre Point, Maslin Beach, Australia, by Mr. Eric Thompson, who was standing on a bluff overlooking the ocean. He had read about a photo contest in his newspaper, and it offered a prize for the best sunrise picture. So he got up early in the dark, went to Maslin Beach, which he thought would be a good place for a sunrise picture, which would be to his back here. And he was standing there. He got his pictures of the sunrise, which weren't too spectacular that morning. And he had turned around, was standing on a bluff looking over a sand quarry there at the beach, when he saw far out in the water, he saw a circle of white water, like white caps in a small circle, running in a circle. And as he watched, a bulge rose in the water, and the water began running off the center of the bulge. And then this metal dome emerged and slowly rose out of the water to about 100 feet. Then it began moving towards the shoreline, where he rated his camera and got this first picture. As he was watching, a small dark object appeared at wave top level, moving in at high speed. It came in close, made one circle around the larger craft. Here you can see it beginning the circle. Came on around, leveled off underneath, and ascended into an opening that appeared in the bottom of the larger craft and docked, and the whole thing flew away together. Maslin Beach, Australia. This next picture was taken over Honolulu on 15 March 1993 at 12 noon. A family, John Atherton and his wife Cherry, were staying at the Pleasant Holiday Isle Hotel on Leeward Street at Waikiki Beach. You can see Waikiki Beach in the lower right-hand corner there, the blue waters of it. And it was checkout time, and John decided to take one last picture of the city before they checked out. He stepped to their 12th floor balcony and shot this one picture, folded the camera, put it in the baggage, and they left. When they developed the film in Los Angeles later, they found this object in the picture, which John did not remember seeing, but he wasn't looking very close. He just snapped the skyline. Remember this picture because exactly 3 years later to the month, a young couple from Australia did about the same thing, and I'll show you that one too. This next one was taken over the East River, New York City, New York Harbor, on 12 April 1993 at 1:20 in the afternoon. A commercial landscape photographer was setting up his camera for a new skyline shot from the east side, or from the west side of the East River there, looking towards the city, when he saw two workmen working down on the riverbank. They were shouting and waving their arms and pointing out over the water. He looked and saw a roiling in the water and a bulge. The water was running off the bulge. A metallic dome began to emerge. He picked up the camera on a big tripod and aimed it by hand with a camera tripod in his arms and got this one picture of the object ascending. He was able to roll the film or change the film and get one more picture of the object much further away, but it was too small to be useful. We could only make out that it was the same or a similar object, at least, of the same proportions flying away. This next one was photographed over Ocotlan in Jalisco, Mexico on 24 April 1993 at 6:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Raul Dominguez Lopez was walking his dog in a high scrub area there early that morning. He was in the habit of walking his dog early in the morning before 6 o'clock or around 6 o'clock, and he had seen this object several times. He prepared a camera and decided to start carrying it with him in case he ever saw it again. And he finally did. He had the camera with him, and he opened the camera and started taking pictures. He got this first one here. You can see there are 4 window lights, or that's what we want to call them, around the dome, and one dark. Here he snapped another picture, and they're all illuminated here. He snapped another picture, and 2 of them are dark. He snapped 4 pictures, actually. Then it ascended overhead and began to rise vertically until it rose out of sight in the clouds and was gone. This is the last picture snapped at Okotlan. This next picture was taken at Canaraville, Utah in June of 1943 or 1993 by Mr. Joe Clower, again, back in that area prospecting for fluorescent rocks once more. He felt a presence, looked up and saw this, grabbed his camera and got the one picture. This next one was a picture that comes to us from Sweden. I'm sorry, from Poland. We don't get many from there either. This was taken at Grajewski, Poland on the 26th of August of 1993 by Eugeniusz Fudali, who was out in a scrub area with a camera looking for birds when he spotted this unusual circular object flying low above the bush there. And he snapped this one picture, rolled the film. We have a jam there. Let's see. Okay. Can we change the film carousel, please? Who's in charge of the camera? Can we change the film carousel? We got so many pictures here. We had to load 3 carousels, and we have to keep moving to get on through. We need number 2, carousel number 2 on there. It's over here. It's the full one. Is that a full tray? That looks like number 2. If it's a full tray, it is. So there's a lot of pictures taken around the world. I have over 4,000 in my collection, and it grows now at the rate of probably 100 or more per year. So far this year, we've got nearly 100 pictures added to the file, and we're only 2/3 of the way through it. But there's a lot of activity, and the pictures get better and better. This is the second picture at Grajewski in Poland. And we may have a third one here. No, we didn't put it in. There was a third one, an enlargement. This picture was taken over Mexico City on the 16th of September 1993 during their Independence Day parade. It's a flight of Northrop F-5 fighters of the Mexican Air Force in parade formation. A police officer on crowd control duty down in the street watching the formation saw it approaching a disc-shaped object that had already passed through another formation of airplanes and through a flight of helicopters, and he snapped this picture getting both the ships and the object in the frame at the same time. This next one was taken over Gulf Breeze, Florida by Mr. Ed Walters, who saw this object approaching from over the water towards Gulf Breeze. He grabbed his video camera, ran out on the veranda of his house, began taping the object as it moves towards shore. He continued taping, and it began to ascend, to rise at about a 30-degree angle. He heard an F-14 jet fighter approaching, but he was concentrating on the object, and he kept it in the viewfinder. And when the F-14 entered the scene, it eclipsed the object in the viewfinder. That was an Navy F-14 fighter. Here's another picture taken over near Ocotlan in Jalisco State of Mexico. Let me switch my cards here if I could find the rubber band. This is near Guadalajara, on the highway from Guadalajara out towards Mexico City on 16th of February 1994. A passenger in a station wagon riding in one of the back seats, looking idly out the window, saw an object that he had seen twice before. He recognized it as a disc-shaped object, a shiny metallic disc-shaped object that he had seen. He called forward to the driver to stop the car. He wanted to get out and take a picture of it. They pulled the van off to the right-hand side of the road. He got out with his camera and snapped this picture. Notice another car has already stopped ahead of them here on the road, on the right-hand side of the road also. People got out of it also and watched the same object. He snapped the second picture, which there was camera motion here and his excitement in snapping the pictures, and it's not nearly as clear, but you can see there's another car coming down the road on the highway here, coming in their direction. This next one comes from Mexico, also from Amicameca in Guerrero State. An unknown photographer, a photographer who insists on remaining anonymous, snapped this picture of the object out over a scrub area there, and it was passed to a friend who took it to a television station, local television station, having a program on UFOs. They showed it on the screen. They didn't know who the photographer was because the friend wouldn't release it, wouldn't release the name. And the television station began a search. They finally found the man and found that he had taken several pictures at the time. Here is about the third one after the one you saw. It's moved around to another angle. You can barely see the object in this printing of it. And here's the limb of a tree. And here's an enlargement that shows you, gives you an idea what it looked. It's not too large. Let's see if we got it. Here it is again, further densified by overprinting to reveal the details of the object. Here's the branches of the same tree here. This next one was photographed over Zacapendo in Michoacan province of Mexico in late May of 1994. 5:30 in the afternoon. Salvador Olmos had come home from work, and he got a can of beer and a camera and went out and laid down in the cot in the backyard, resting, drinking his beer. When he saw this object approaching, he grabbed the camera, small plastic Instamatic type camera, snapped the one picture of the object passing along the skyline, a mountain skyline there. If we had more of the picture, and you would see his toes in the bottom of the picture where he's laying down and snapping the picture along his body as the object passed over. This next one was a photograph taken near King Mountain, Colorado on the 3rd of July, late at night. Morris Reardon was riding his motorcycle between the ski resort at Vail and Grand Junction when he ran into a snowstorm or a rainstorm. He encountered some severe weather, a lot of electrical activity, and in the lightning he could see this huge disc shape in the clouds. So he stopped his motorcycle, got out, and took the camera off the back, strapped on the back of the motorcycle, readied it to take a picture, waiting for the lightning to reveal the position of the disc. When it did and he saw where the disc was, he pointed the camera at it and clicked the shutter, forgetting that his flash attachment was on. As soon as the camera flashed, he got this display immediately afterwards from the craft in the sky. These electrical discharges even struck the ground and started a fire. Next, please. Here's one from Basilica de Guadalupe in Mexico. It's a very famous religious shrine in Mexico City, in the central district of Mexico City. It was taken on 17 July 1994 at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, right after an evening mass. Jesus Romero and his family had come out of the church from mass and saw people in the street looking up. And they looked up and saw a round, dark object flying back and forth over the roof lines of the basilica and its outbuildings there. Jesus, the younger boy, teenage boy in the family, had an Instamatic 110 camera with him, and he began taking pictures, had a fresh roll of film, and he started with 0, and he snapped the whole roll, 12 pictures of this activity over the Basilica de Guadalupe. Here's another one, give you an idea. This is dirt over here. There's the object over another dome in the Basilica. Here's another one. They were all little square pictures like that. This next one comes from Montemorelos in Nuevo León province, and here again, the picture was brought to a television program by a spectator that was visiting in the studio, and he showed the picture to the television moderator. They put it on the program, showed it to the public. The man that brought the picture had no knowledge where the picture come from. He had seen it in the hands of a friend and said he was going to the television station, asked to borrow it, and the friend let him have it. And starting an investigation and going back to the friend, they found that this was taken in a certain state or certain part of Nuevo León state, and the television crew spent days trying to identify the locality and find anybody that knew anything about it. They finally traced it back to Pepe Martinez, who was with a group of hunters that day, and Pepe had returned to the base camp early to start a fire for a barbecue lunch, and it's about high noon at the time, and as he was starting the fire, he still had his camera over his shoulder, and he saw what appeared to be a glint in the sand, made him look up, and looking over his shoulder, he saw this object. He had time to open the camera and snap that one picture. He rolled the film to snap another picture and passed out. And he woke up on his stomach in the sand with the camera about 10 feet from him. He didn't know that he had snapped the second picture. He was only aware of snapping one. But when he got the developed prints back from the photo shop, he found that the second picture had been taken, and that's what it looked like. While the television team was trying to run down Pepe Martinez, they were in his neighborhood now, and they're asking neighbors for closer directions to Pepe Martinez's home. When one of the neighbors said, they were explaining why they were there. The neighbor said, I took a picture of a UFO myself. And he ran in and went in his house and came out with this picture of a strange object, all right. It was flying in the air. He saw it approaching. By the time he got back out with the camera, it was quite low like this and descending slowly into the scrub. He took a second picture, I didn't put it in here, with the tops of the grass eclipsing the object. He estimated it to be about 30 to 40 feet in diameter. This picture comes from Camembero in Guanajuato State in Mexico. There was a well-known Mexican UFO researcher, Arturo Romero Garcia, who has written a number of articles for the Mexican UFO magazines, even some Western magazines. He's well known all over the country there. He had a 12-year-old son that began telling him that he was seeing UFOs over the backyard. Of course, Arturo Romero doesn't believe a bit of it. He thinks his son is teasing him. And the son has come in several times for his father to come out and look at the UFO over the backyard. He hasn't given in yet, and he's doing something in the house when the boy came back in. He said, "Would you come take a picture of me and my friend before he leaves?" And his dad picked up the camera and went outside. That's what the friend turned out to be, and here's the 12-year-old son taking a pose here with the object over his shoulder. So the UFO investigator finally got a picture in his own camera of his own son with an object that he's been pursuing for many years. Here's a picture from a series taken over Gulf Breeze, Florida on the 24th of September 1994. Now this series of pictures never got any publicity because the photographer, seeing what was happening to Ed Walters and other people that reported sightings and events, decided not to report it to anybody. He had shown it to a friend of mine who was interviewing witnesses on another sighting, and he mentioned that he had taken pictures himself, went in and got the whole set. There was 12 of them. Showed them to my friend, and my friend succeeded in getting copies of the pictures, sent them to me, and I included 2 of them in my calendars, one on this slide. I may have another one in here. Here's another picture of the object. This started when Phil Sackey came home from work, and he got out of his car and he saw up in the darker developing storm clouds, he saw a dark round object moving in and out of the clouds. And he got out of the car with his camera. He took 4 pictures of the dark object at cloud base level, sometimes, a couple of times, partly obscured by cloud matter. He came in the house, set the camera on the table where his wife is setting dinner out, went in the bathroom to wash his hands for dinner. While he's doing this, his wife calls and says, "Phil, your friend is back out over the yard here. You better come take a look." He came back out, and this is what he saw hovering over the backyard, and he snapped the other 8 pictures on the roll of that object. Here's one more, and that series of pictures by Phil Sackey of Gulf Breeze, Florida. And one more. That may be the last one. Oh, we got another one here. And another. Okay, this next group of pictures, that's still Phil Sackey. This next group of pictures was taken over Teotihuacan Pyramid, that's Pyramid of the Sun, in Mexico City on the 25th of September 1994 at 7:30 in the evening, the afternoon. Samuel Garcia was with his father, Juventud Garcia, on a tourist visit, taking pictures with a cheap Instamatic camera. When they saw this object moving, there's the top of the Pyramid of the Sun there in the lower part of the picture. And the boy, the 13-year-old boy, I think it was in this case, took this first picture. The object moved around to another angle away from the pyramid. He snapped the second picture. Very good pictures for cheap type Polaroid or cheap Instamatic type camera. This next series of pictures was taken over the reservoir at Zitacuaro in Michoacan province, where Arturo Romero Garcia, the man who photographed his son with the object over his head, has been interviewing witnesses at the reservoir for many months about objects that are seen to come out of the reservoir, ascend into the sky and fly away. Other objects are seen to approach, hover, descend, and enter the waters of the reservoir at about a 30 to 40 degree angle without a splash, and descend beneath the surface and not come back out again. So he has been here several times interviewing witnesses and guards who have all seen this. He's been given pictures that other people have been taken, and he's chosen a vantage point where he can see much of the reservoir, where he sits and waits and watches himself between interviews to see what he can see. He finally got his opportunity, and he took 3 pictures. There's number 1. Oh boy, it's got the scene at the top. Number 2, maybe we get it in the scene here. Number 3, there's the 3rd picture, and after this it descended, entered the waters of the reservoir and disappeared. Somebody going to lift it? Okay, let me back up. Here's number 2, and here's number 1. Okay, this next one was taken by Arturo Romero on another day, on the 10th of February. This is 5 months later, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He's back at his favorite vantage point there, and he saw it, and he got 2 pictures. This is the only one I have in here. The other one, he changed the light settings. It was a little darker, and it was in a slightly different location. This is another printing of the same picture you just saw, showing the whole scene. Here's the second one with the darker, after he's changed his light setting on the camera, or the speed. Here's a picture taken over Gulf Breeze, Florida by Mike Hawkins on 11 October 1994. He's a local resident who is interested in UFOs, was collecting other people's photographs of the objects over Gulf Breeze. Always wanted to get his own picture. Had taken pictures with a video camera on at least 5 different occasions, but he came out of his little trailer home, saw this object hovering over the trees in his backyard, ran back in, got his camera, and got back outside in time to snap this one picture of the object before it was gone. Finally got his own picture. Here's a photograph taken over Hidalgo City, just outside of Hidalgo City in Michoacan province of Mexico, on 1 November 1994 at midday, about noon. Filiberto Sanchez Pena was walking in a wooded area there when he saw this object moving in the sky. He watched it for a few minutes, then he heard the sound of a heavy truck approaching, and he saw a lumber truck coming down a forest trail out of the woods, loaded with logs, and it had 2 men and a forest ranger sitting on the log pile on the back, and 1 man in the truck driving it. He stood in the middle of the trail and waved his arms up and down, forcing the truck to stop, and got them all to look at this. They all climbed off the truck, stood in a circle watching it. The forest ranger had a Polaroid camera, a ranger camera over his shoulders, and he opened it up and he took 3 pictures of the object as they watched. There's picture number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Now the man that saw it the first time, seeing the ranger taking the pictures, tapped him on the shoulder and says, "Could I buy a copy of those?" And the ranger said, "Certainly." They exchanged addresses, and the ranger mailed those 3 copies back to him after they were developed out. This picture was taken at Salvatierra, which is just outside of Mexico City, in Guanajuato province, in November 1994 at 6:30 in the evening. Juan Aguiar had just returned from work, and looking up as he's getting out of his car, he saw this object hovering in the sky over his apartment building. His wife was standing in the door looking out. He told her, "Keep an eye on that. I'm going to get a camera." And he ran in and got the camera, came back out in time to snap 2 pictures. There's one, and there's the second one. Salvatierra, Mexico. Here's a picture taken over Coajimalpa in the Federal District of Mexico City. That's the Central District, on 24 December 1994 at 11:30 a.m. by the Victor Almost family, who had stopped along the highway there to look at a construction project in work. When they saw this object hovering over the same construction project, or just this side of it, had the camera in hand there in the car, and they took this one picture, the object flew away. This next picture was taken over Passo Fundo, Brazil. That's in Rio Grande province of Brazil in 1994 by an unidentified witness who sent this picture into official UFO published by A.J. Gaviard down there. The interesting thing about this is, first of all, it's a flat black picture, a fuzzy black picture. It looks like it might be light absorbing because we can't see any details in it. Now remember this, we have a number of pictures